What's going on, my gamers? Welcome back to Goshen's Games, and today we're going to take a look at Control on the PS5. So this is the PS5 version of Control, and we're going to take a look at the performance mode versus the graphics mode, and I'm going to explain the differences between the two as we get to different scenes throughout the game. Now, I've recorded most of the introduction and most of introduction gameplay because I feel like that's all we really need to see to be able to see the differences between the two. There are very subtle differences and there's very immediate differences, and so I will be going and explaining each of those as we go through the video. Now, don't forget to leave a comment down below. I will be choosing a random comment from a random video every month to give away a year membership of PlayStation Plus. So if you want to participate in that giveaway, leave a comment on the videos and make sure you guys are hitting that like button, subscribe if you guys are new. Let's go ahead and get to the video.
We live in a room, and there's a poster on the wall. We stare at it and we think that's the whole world. The room and the poster. The picture's something nice. A landscape, a famous person. Like in that movie, what is it called? The prison movie. The room's a cell, and the picture, it's different for each of us. It can be beautiful or terrible.
Now, initially in cutscenes, the cutscenes don't really have a difference. They seem to be locked at 30 FPS. There's no difference between either one of them, and the ray tracing, if it is there, it's so subtle that you barely notice it. If you pay attention to, for example, in the beginning when she's walking into the building from the street, you can see the differences in the shadow textures, and you can see the differences in the ray tracing, the way that the light is being reflected off of the street, because it seems like it may have just rained outside. So in the graphics mode, in this regard, you can see a little bit of difference if you're paying attention to it, but otherwise you don't really seem to notice it.
Freak out and try to forget what they saw.
Now, to note, both of these images, both the performance and the graphics mode, were recorded at 4K on the PS5. Okay, using an Elgato 4K Mark II. So that way there's no discrepancy between the two. There's pun intended, control between the variables. So on the left hand side you see performance, on the right hand side you see graphics. Performance mode tops out at 60 FPS, and it actually holds it quite consistently. I never really noticed any sort of dips in the gameplay at 60 FPS, and then the graphics being at 30 FPS, I've never seen any dips as well.
And there goes the poster.
Objects of power can cause or be results of AWE's altered world events, intrusions upon the perceived reality. Now, the service weapon is, of course, a prime example of an OOP, a very powerful one. Ingrained in the Bureau's DNA, a key component in our prime candidate program. Come out of that Russian roulette a winner, and you're it.
Look at this place.
Now, as we get to the first area when Jesse gets the gun, it's hard to notice the ray tracing uh, in the graphics mode. Only when you have them side by side from performance and graphics mode. Otherwise, you really don't notice it at all. There were many times that I was playing through the game that I just didn't notice the ray tracing unless I had it side by side with the performance mode, and then I could specifically tell the difference. Now, another thing to note is that the 60 FPS, as you move the camera, everything moves smoothly. There's very little motion blur, and I did turn off motion blur and film grain for both of these. So there's very little motion blur going on, and it's a very smooth camera movement, and it gives the illusion that it's moving faster than it should be. And those of you guys who play at higher FPS, you understand what I'm saying when I say that. Looking at the 30 FPS mode for the graphics, the fidelity mode, when you move the camera around, it does blur the backgrounds quite a bit, and that again gives the illusion that everything's moving slower. Even your character feels like she's moving slower as opposed to the performance mode, which in my opinion does affect the way that you play the game. Fighting enemies in performance mode feels so much better because it feels like a shooter, where fighting enemies in graphics mode feels a little clunky, feels sluggish, and it just overall just doesn't give that shooter experience. Now, granted, this is to make the game look more cinematic. If you guys ever played a game like Last of Us Part 2, for example, the game runs at 30 FPS. It's kind of locked in there. And it makes the game feel a little sluggish compared to if you were to play a game at 60 FPS or higher, my game which would be more fast-paced, such as Doom, right? Doom on the PS4 is locked at 60 FPS, and it's a very smooth running game. And if you play it on PC, you can get the FPS to be even higher. So that's something to note when you're in combat. It feels so much better in performance mode. Now, this section right here is a perfect example of me not noticing the ray tracing unless I had them side by side. And this moment right here where Jesse is entering the area and it's completely covered in a red light, if you pay attention on the graphics section or the graphics side, you will notice that the images are being reflected off of the mirrors, or the windows, I should say, properly, as if it was in real time and you were looking at it yourself. So the bodies that are floating there are reflected off of the windows, where in the performance mode they are not. And this is something that I did not notice until I had them next to each other. And again, when the lights turn back to normal and get away from the red, you can still see the reflection of the light on the windows. As opposed to the performance mode, you cannot see it. So this is something, again, that's very subtle in a way, because you enter combat, you're not paying attention to it, you're not looking for those attention to details. Also, the carpet, the way that the shadows are reflecting on the carpet is much more realistic, as well as just the shadows for everything in general, the way they're reflecting on the walls, the way they're reflecting on the stone architectures. Everything looks more detailed and realistic as opposed to the performance mode. And I leave it up to you guys whether you prefer the performance mode or the graphics mode. I'm going to tell you right now, just because of the nature of the game, when we're getting into combat and stuff like that, I really don't care about the graphics, and I really don't care about the ray tracing. It's impressive and it looks good, but at the end of the day, I want the game to feel as fluid as possible, and so I end up playing it on performance mode. But I will leave that up to you guys. You guys make that decision on your own. Let me know down in the comment section, which do you prefer, performance mode or graphics mode? Some might prefer graphics mode, and I can completely understand that. Thank you so much for watching today. I appreciate it, everybody. Have a fantastic rest of your day. I'll see you in the next video.